This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. In the first strike, all East Coast and Gulf Coast ports in almost 50 years, dock workers from Maine to Texas walked out on strike at midnight this morning. The International Longshoremen Association represents some 40,000 dock workers at 36 ports who are demanding higher wages and guarantees that jobs won't be automated. This is Daniel Amali, a worker who joined picket lines this morning at Port Elizabeth outside New York City after the ILA's contract with shipping companies expired.
The ILA is fighting for respect, appreciation, and fairness in a world in which corporations are dead set on replacing hardworking people with automation. Employers push automation under the guise of safety, but it is really about cutting labor costs to increase their already exceptionally high profits.
On Sunday, President Biden said he would not intervene to stop the strike, which will disrupt trade and potentially lead to high prices just weeks before the presidential election.
Mr. President, would you intervene in the dock workers strike if they go on strike on Tuesday?
No.
Why not?
Because it's collective bargaining. I don't believe in Taft-Hartley.
For more, we're joined by Peter Goodman, no relation, New York Times global economics correspondent. His recent piece is headlined, "Beneath the Potential Strike at U.S. Ports, Tensions Over Innovation." His new book is titled, "How the World Ran Out of Everything Inside the Global Supply Chain." Peter, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Explain what just took place at midnight. We're talking about Maine to Texas.
Right.
The ports are shut down.
Yeah, we're talking about 36 shipping terminals at 14 different port authorities. We're talking about ports that are the gateway for roughly half of all the imported goods reaching the United States. Contract ended at midnight, and the dock workers walked off their jobs. They're seeking higher wages and guarantees that they will not be replaced through automation.
And Peter, in terms of the workers have been talking about the huge profits that the shipping companies have been making. Could you talk about that in context of their wage demands?
Yeah, so for a good period after the pandemic, where we had these massive disruptions that were enormous profit opportunities for the shipping companies. You know, we read a lot of headlines that it's chaos when we have these giant queues off of the twin ports of LA and Long Beach, the West Coast ports that are the gateway for about 40% of all imported goods reaching the country by container ship. And there's this implication that this is somehow bad for the ocean carriers. But the unfunny punchline of every one of these episodes, whether it's floating traffic jams or more recently restrictions on traffic moving through the Panama Canal because of drought, or ships that can't go through the Suez Canal because of strikes by Houthi rebels who are acting in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. Every single time there's disruption, we see prices go up and profits go to record levels for the ocean carriers. At the same time, the dock workers, who have very dangerous jobs, they're very physically rigorous jobs, they are highly paid, but their position is we're entitled to that as compensation. Their wages have actually flatlined. They've stagnated compared to inflation, and so they're seeking what looks like a very substantial headline increase, 70+%. It's been reported, though there's not a lot of open discussion of these terms over the next several years. And overnight, it seems like the port operators tried to bridge the distance with a package that they say would be about a 50% raise. The dock workers say that's not enough. And one of the things they're very concerned about is the push. This is a historic push. It goes back to the beginning of container shipping in the 1950s to replace them with robots, other forms of automation. Robots don't go on strike. They don't have sick kids to take care of at home. They don't need time off with their families. This really goes back to the beginning of the container industry, where time and again employers have sought to use various forms of technology to limit their vulnerability to exactly what we've got now, a work stoppage, as dock workers seek a greater piece of the action.
And could you talk about how the emphasis for the several decades now of worldwide capital of having just-in-time production lines of products coming in to be sold immediately, how well the American industry can withstand a long strike?
Well, a long strike is going to be tough because we've already seen a lot of diversion of cargo from East Coast ports to West Coast ports. Congestion could quickly build up if that continues. We've seen a little bit of diversion to places like Mexican ports where we've got road and rail connections into the U.S. And eventually on to Canada. But those ports are much smaller. They're less efficient. The rail system, by the way, has really been depleted by a version of just-in-time known as precision scheduled railroading, which is essentially a fancy way of saying, let's fire lots of workers. Let's stick the remaining workers with extra jobs. They've diminished service. They've made trains longer than ever, so accidents tend to be much more dangerous. And it's really about boosting returns for shareholders at the expense of the operational capacity of the rail system. So the idea that rail will pick up the burden is really dubious. If this thing goes on, we're likely to see serious congestion off the West Coast ports, similar to what we saw during the pandemic. Container ships turned into floating warehouses, and we are likely to see product shortages and potentially inflation if this goes on for a few weeks.
The president of the International Longshoremen's Association, Harold Daggett, endorsed Biden in the 2020 election, but more recently accused Biden of, quote, not fighting for us. Last November, Daggett said he had a productive meeting with former President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He spoke in a video released by the union last month.
We went on strike in 1977 for 3 months for 80 cents. Fast forward, back then, the companies were lucky they made millions of dollars, to 10 million, 5 million. Today, they make billions and billions of dollars. MSC is the richest shipping company in the world, made 3 times the money than Amazon. A lot of money, right? Billions. Well, one of the companies, and I won't mention his name, he took himself for Christmas bonus, $4 billion. He took it out for him and his family, $4 billion. A French company, I won't mention their name, they gave all their employees 50 months' salary as a Christmas gift. Now, look at that money. They have so much money, they don't even know what to do with it.
A $4 billion bonus for the boss. That's president of the International Longshoremen's Association, Harold Daggett. Peter Goodman, can you talk about what he said, sure, and also the significance of U.S. business groups wanting Biden to invoke the Taft-Hartley Act, and Biden saying he's not going to, and what that means?
Sure. It's a very strange dynamic because, of course, traditionally, labor, key Democratic constituency, Biden is very reluctant to wade in and end this strike because he faced a backlash when he used a different law to shut down the railroad strike 2 years ago without getting paid sick leave for traveling maintenance crews and other rail workers. So he's very reluctant to be the guy who steps in, takes away the leverage for the union. I mean, this is a time of labor mobilization in this country. And of course, we saw that the UAW did very well with a militant strike. The ILA is doing likewise. Here's the irony, though. So you've got all these business groups that are lobbying the Biden administration to act because, of course, the economy writ large is going to get hit by a long strike. Factories that are dependent upon imported components and parts are going to get hit. Retailers waiting for products to come in, often from Asia, will get hit. Consumers could face shortages, inflation. Here's the one group that probably won't get hit: the shipping carriers. I mean, I spoke last night to the chair of the Federal Maritime Commission, who said that this is the classic playbook that goes back to the pandemic, where the shipping carriers cut capacity, and what happens? Prices go up. We're talking about a cartel. This is an international cartel that's made up of 3 alliances. Think like airline alliances, like your Star Alliance, your One World. They've got 85 to 90% of the traffic on the key routes from Asia to Europe and from Asia to the west and east coast of the United States. So the longer this goes on, the higher the prices go, potentially the higher the profits for the shipping carriers. So the one move for the union is, well, we're going to monkey wrench the economy as a way to generate pressure for a settlement. But that could actually be good for the people they're trying to get greater leverage for. That could increase the pressure on the Biden administration, really reluctant, again, to intervene in a labor dispute to put an end to this thing because it will hit the real economy. And I don't have to tell you that we're only weeks away from a presidential election that could very well hinge on economic sentiments and unhappiness over inflation.
Well, we want to thank you for being with us, and we have to have you back on to talk about your new book. Peter Goodman, New York Times global economics correspondent. His most recent piece, Beneath the Potential Strike at U.S. Ports, Tensions Over Innovation. We'll link to that. His new book, How the World Ran Out of Everything Inside the Global Supply Chain. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.